What apparently happened was that the Iraqi forces just showed no will to fight. They were not outnumbered. In fact, they vastly outnumbered the opposing force, and yet they failed to fight.
That was Secretary of Defense Ash Carter on Sunday talking about what happened in the fall of Ramadi, that the Iraqi forces, even though they outnumbered ISIS, they didn't have the will to fight. He says, though, that we're going to continue the president's strategy in Iraq. Senator McCain, for his part, said,
we need to have a robust strategy. We need more troops on the ground. We need forward air controllers. We're just referring to airstrikes. Do you know that 75% of those combat missions return to base without having fired a weapon?
All right, who's right, who's wrong? There's only one person that knows for sure. It's KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. KT, Iraqi army has no will to fight, so do we stay the course with the strategy that we've got, or do you agree with Senator McCain that we need to boost up a new robust strategy?
Oh, I'd like a third way.
Okay.
I think Ash Carter, God bless him for speaking truth to power. You know, the dirty little secret about Iraq is there is no more Iraq. It's been splintered into three parts. There are the Kurds in the north who are wildly pro-American, fierce fighters willing to defend themselves, but they don't have weapons. The Shiites in Baghdad, they're pro-Iranian, and they're unwilling to fight for the Kurds or for the Sunnis. And they're the Sunni tribes in the middle. They don't want to follow ISIS necessarily, but they don't want to be sucked into Shiite Iraq. The only people we're arming in all of this are the Iraqis. In other words, we're arming the Iraq/Iranians. We're not arming the Kurds. We're not arming the Sunnis. We're sending weapons to the Iraqi military and said, hey, you guys pass this along, but of course they're not doing it.
So is there a problem with our thinking in that we now look at Iraq as this, this whole piece to the puzzle, but actually there are three pieces, and maybe we just need to, make that conclusion and just, let them go their separate ways?
What's brewing, I think, are the winds of war blowing, and it's going to be a fight to the finish between the Shiites and the Sunnis. The Shiites are the Persians, they're the Iranians. The Sunnis are ISIS. Right now they're Saudi Arabia. Who knows where that is later. But a fight to the finish where they're both sort of lining up battle lines, getting ready to fight each other. The neocons, with Senator McCain and others, they want us to once again step into the breach and fight in place of the Iraqi army. And because the Iraqi army is not going to defend the Kurds, it's not going to defend the Sunnis. We've been there. We've done that. Humpty Dumpty doesn't get put back together again. And the surge strategy, for all of its success 8 years ago, is not going to succeed again. There's no second act to that.
We got to give credit where credit is due, though. The scenario you just painted, KT McFarland, is pretty much exactly what then Senator Joe Biden said when he was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. People sort of chuckled at him and laughed at him, and he at the time said, we need to split this country up, let the Kurds have their space, let the Sunnis have their place, let the Shiites have was he off base?
No, I think he was premature. There would have been a solution. If Obama had not pulled out prematurely from Iraq, you could have had a unified Iraq. But he did pull out prematurely, and as a result, it did splinter into three parts. So, Biden is probably right today. I think he was wrong then. I think we should have given it the try, having sacrificed so much for so long. But we didn't. We withdrew. President Obama decided it was a Bush war, not an Obama war. So he left prematurely, and we have the mess that we have. When I look at this, I say, okay, we are where we are now. You can't redo the surge. You can't redo the Biden thing. You are where you are, and you have enemies fighting each other. If you've got two enemies fighting each other, ISIS and Iran, why should you step in and try to stop them? You should use your efforts to make sure the fight stays there and doesn't come here.
I've been fascinated by this story that I read this morning about something that the Boeing company and the United States Air Force has been working on. They've come up with what they call an EMP device, an electromagnetic pulse device.
Electromagnetic pulse.
That's right. That apparently now they put it on a missile. You fly the missile over an area, and then they fire off the pulse, and it wipes out every electronic device in the immediate area. This is an incredible thing that we have now apparently in our arsenal.
We have a number of new weapons coming out in our arsenal, and laser guns are one of them, EMP. But an EMP device, what that does is you would also have the same effect with a nuclear weapon. If you detonated it high up in space,
right,
that it would fry all the electronic devices and basically put everybody back to the pre-electric age. and it would be extremely effective. It would be probably most effective against us, since we're so highly dependent on electricity and high technology.
But I mean, how this could be used, let's say, like to soften a battlefield before an invasion, right?
It could be used for that. It could be used for intimidation. It could be used for a number of things. So hopefully, it never gets used.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it would literally destroy an infrastructure of computers anywhere in the area.
Which is why we're the most vulnerable to it. And if I'm hoping that if we develop this weapon, we also develop
a countermeasure, right?
Yeah. To protect us.
KT, there's wargaming going on in the Pacific, and for the first time, really ever, Japan is going to be participating in a very major way. Of course, we had an agreement now. The president had the Prime Minister Abe here, and we agreed to allow Japan to have more of a robust military presence outside of their borders, the first time since World War II. Is this a good thing, or is this actually potentially a problem for some of our Asian allies who people here in America might not realize? There are a lot of countries who are still wary of Japan, and they have long memories.
They're more wary of China today than Japan yesterday. And that's what you're seeing, a realignment in Asia as the Japanese, the Vietnamese, others step up because they see the rise of China. They're much more concerned with what China's doing in the South China Sea, where it's using these piles of rocks to then build up, using sand, dredging sand up, building the piles of rocks into little islands, then potentially putting airfields and ports on them, and then claiming all the water in between the mainland of China and these islands in the South China
Right,
Sea.
we talked about this last week. They're calling them the unsinkable aircraft carriers. And they're just claiming it as their own. It's this passage between mainland China and Philippines where 60% of the trade goes.
Yes, exactly. And it's like us saying, okay, we're going to build Hawaii up, and everything between Hawaii and the west coast of the United States, that's ours.
Right. Well, it's a little bigger space, but
so maybe it's more like the Gulf of Mexico. But the point being that the others in the region who also transit through those routes for their own trade, who fish in those seas, who claim some of those islands, they're looking at that and saying this is a Chinese takeover of East Asia, and we hope that the United States is with us, but we're not going to necessarily rely completely on the United States. We need to have our own defense forces, and that's a good thing, because the more pro-U.S. allies we have in a region, the better.
Right. I about 5 years ago, I sat down with a very high-ranking military official for a sort of background briefing, and I can't give you the guy's name even today because I said I wouldn't, but I asked the question, I said, who do you fear most? Do you fear China more, or do you fear Russia, or the what was once the Soviet Union? Do you fear Putin more? And his answer was China. Is that still true today?
China's the long-term threat. Putin's the near-term threat. Russia economically is a basket case because they've not taken the windfall profits they've had from their high oil and natural gas prices to build up an infrastructure and an economy. So if the prices of energy are low, they're broke. But the problem is, in between now and then, they're potentially very aggressive, because to stay in power, Putin isn't giving his people a good economy, so he's got to create an enemy for them, and the enemy is us. The enemy is the West.
Yeah, well,
so he could be trigger happy.
I've seen that playbook before. Okay.
Apparently, Russia used all that money to get the World Cup.
Yeah, that's what we're learning.
That's what we're learning
this morning. Right.
KT McFarland, thanks for joining us.
KT, thank you.
Thank you.